Why is there such a huge gap between what we think parenting is going to be and what it actually is?
So much about what's done in care is happening in your heart and in your head. People don't see it, and it's harder to get the confirmation or the affirmation that you need to feel good about what you're doing.
Why, when we have children, do we think it's going to bring us closer together, but often it really pushes us apart?
In the couples that I work with, one of the biggest challenges is one person's like, yeah, I want to come home and relax. And the other person's like, I can't relax until it's done.
What are the jobs of mums and dads now? What's a dad when we're no longer just providers? What's a mum when they often are?
When asked an open-ended question to men and women alike, what is the primary trait that is most important in a spouse? For men, it's 77% of the time it's being a financial provider.
What am I supposed to teach or model for my children when I've no idea what the world is going to look like in 5 years' time? Why did my parents seem to have loads of conviction about these things and I have absolutely none? In this podcast, I talk with experts from all around the world about these problems and hopefully get some wisdom, some insight, and maybe most importantly, some perspective, and find out what it takes to be a happier parent. Brian Page is a man who has thrown himself into running his family and home, and now he helps other couples do the same. Brian is a personal finance educator, and he talks to me about the emotional scripts that we all carry around money and why they can lead to such conflict. We also talk about learning to negotiate based on efficiency rather than morality, and Brian gives us an amazing hack for how couples with younger kids can have a genuinely relaxing date. I really got on well with Brian and we had a real laugh recording this episode, but it taught me a lot too, and I think it's going to do the same for you. You started this company,
Modern Husbands.
Like, just tell me your story. Like, how did you get there and why?
I had a career that I left to support my wife's. In order to do that, we needed to move about 8 hours away. And when we moved, I took on an adjacent career that grew to be pretty significant, like the one I had was before, kind of like a time suck, like kind of a lot of high stress. And my wife had the same kind of job, and we had 3 kids and some challenges with, some of the children at home. And, it was during the pandemic, and we, didn't need both incomes as much as we needed, flexibility for one of us, and we moved because of her career. So, it was kind of my turn because up until that point, she had always been the domestic safety net at home. And I just Googled, how do you be a great husband? Because I didn't understand really how to run a home. My wife had really run the home. I was working 80 hours a week for over a decade. So it wasn't like I was out like playing golf or something, getting drunk with my buddies while my wife was home doing the dishes. It wasn't like that. Once I Googled that, it was like, okay, because I got to figure out how to do this well. And born was Modern Husbands.
I guess you're the perfect person to ask this question too. What's in it for men to do that? I feel like this debate often gets stuck in running a home is hard and awful and women are sick of it and we want men to do it instead. But actually surely there's more to it than that. You must have found some real positives in taking on that role.
Yeah, so I'll start like big picture. What the research has found is that when men assume an equitable share of the household labor, that there's greater marital satisfaction, but more importantly, it's actually men who have a more significant boost in personal happiness. And then a second data point is that when there's an equitable share of household labor, the frequency of sex increases. So kind of putting that out there, fellas. From my perspective, it just makes it easier, I think, for us to be our authentic selves. And being and obviously I still work full time, but being the domestic safety net, being the one who really tackles probably, in my case, far more of the domestic labor, has been great for me for a couple reasons. Like first, I mean, I'd already accomplished really what I had want to accomplish in my career. So there was that sense of satisfaction, I think, and I think that it makes it easier to do what I'm doing now. But more importantly, you can be our authentic self. So for me, for instance, I my joy derives from helping people and not from money. Believe it or not, I'm a so-called financial expert, but that's not what drives me. My wife's driven more by kind of her career ambitions and probably money. And so for us, it made more sense because we didn't set out to do it. This wasn't the motivation, but if money isn't your driving source of happiness, but helping people is, and your spouse is, and being around your kids is, it's more enjoyable. It was like, yeah, this is pretty freaking awesome. Like, yeah, I get to drop my kids off at school and make sure that, I'm there when they get home. And like, this is great. I don't know what people are bitching about. That's my perspective. So I think obviously that is a very personal thing. It depends on, who you are, what drives you, what society, like how much you are allowing society to influence your feelings. But those have been my experiences.
Can I just check, when you're saying you get to be your authentic self, are you holding that in contrast to constantly being in a professional world where you have to adopt a different persona?
No, I wouldn't say my persona is different. I would just say that how I'm spending my time is different, right? Like if
You're working in line with your values.
Yeah, right. Yep.
Yeah, beautiful. And then I guess what the fact that you've started this company, and when you Googled it, you weren't getting a satisfactory answer, suggests that actually it wasn't that easy just to be like, oh yeah, all this is awesome, I'm on top of everything. Right?
No, it's not. So, let's put this kind of challenge in two buckets. One bucket would be, kind of caregiving, and the other bucket would be, being a great husband, like domestic labor support, that kind of thing. And so what I found when I was exploring this was that, like, for me, from my perspective, I was looking for efficiencies, right? Like, how can I be really good at doing A, B, and C? Like, I'm not like dreaming about doing the dishes with glee here. I'm like, okay, how can I make this household run as efficiently as possible? Like, it's a little business. And I was captivated by, the new terms like the mental load and emotional labor and visible labor, like all these things that I had never been accustomed to or introduced to, because those were things that my wife had done. But ultimately, those are the things that really run a house. And so when I started to understand, first by reading Dr. Kate Mangino's book, who's a dear friend, Equal Partners, to kind of wrap my mind around like the societal norms that, kind of shape who we are inside our homes. And then Eve's book, Fair Play, who's a friend that's really it's a systems approach to managing home. And then just more and more research like that, right? Like, how can I somehow make sure that everything's efficient, and that we being my wife and I, we don't have to have conversations about doing the dishes or going to the grocery, or because those conversations, like, they are not fun. They sometimes lead to little disputes. They create frustrations. They create inefficiencies. So from my perspective, it's like, all right, man, how can I do this in a way where it's like I can get this thing locked down and done? And for my wife and I, making sure that the roles that we played in our home supported the roles that we played outside of them. We look at our roles metaphorically. Like, I am right now the gardener in the relationship, and she's the rose. And for years before that, it was the opposite. So what does that mean? It means that as the gardener in our relationship, yeah, I'm still working, but my responsibility in our relationship is to nourish the home environment so she can bloom in her career as a rose.
Whereas
Her
you are already a beautiful rose, as we can see,
I am.
Brian.
I am.
That's
So,
that you
so the
that,
only people that
that
would
is
believe
done.
that are the ones only listening to this.
That rose is gardened to perfection already. We can see that.
So she's it just makes it like easier for us in that way to like just practically like the little things that add up that come up, like what if your kid's sick? Like who's gonna get him? I'm the gardener. Like that's on me. I'm the domestic safety net. It just makes it far easier to be able to kind of manage those things.
I think it's really interesting that you're like really, really happy to do that. The massive societal expectation of men that really why we're put on this planet is to be a workhorse, and that our the thing that we can bring to our homes is to really earn more than the next guy, right? Otherwise, how do you
Yeah,
win at the
yeah.
being a man game? But what you're saying is that you found it easier to make this transition because you're like, I've done well at that thing.
Yeah, yeah,
And I think maybe
yeah.
it's harder to take the perspective that you're taking when we're men. If we feel our competence can be questioned at that man game,
Oh, absolutely. Like there's this and maybe some guys they're better fellas than me. They can be like, oh yeah, I could do this from the outset. I mean, I think there's a few things here that I need to provide contextually to help people understand, why I can do what I'm doing. Like one is, we're a little on the older side, and we're well established financially, and my wife earns a great income. I had done well, so we had the privilege to kind of do this, and it by being in that situation, it dampers the societal expectations of men to be the financial provider. And that's not going away. Like I want to say Equimundo's research found that when asked an open-ended question to men and women alike, what is the primary trait that is most important in a spouse? For men, it's 77% of the time it's being a financial provider. It's 71% of women who say that. So
right?
it's women are look at it basically the same way as men. I read an advanced copy of Melissa Hogenboom, who's a BBC journalist. She wrote the book Breadwinners. It was wonderful, very
Yeah,
well
she's
researched.
been on the show. She's like
Oh, she has. Oh,
she
she's
lives
brilliant.
around the corner from me.
Okay, so then I don't need to go into her wonderful book, but like I think it brings to light the fact that for a lot of people those expectations are very real, and that those could be the expectations of your spouse too. So
Well,
hats
I
off
think
to my wife.
Melissa said when we had the conversation, she's like, look, when me and my friends were in the dating world, we weren't looking for a guy who was going to be like, oh, I can't wait to have kids so I can stay at home with them.
Right.
That wasn't what we were looking for, right? And I think that often gets forgotten.
That's true. Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah. I think we have to be really honest about the jam that guys are in, where it's like, yeah, we're supposed to be the financial providers, but at the same time, we better be doing a lot at home. It's tough. It's your roles change over time. And adapting perhaps is a trait that we perhaps should look at, is the fact that, in the modern world, roles change, careers change, things change, and we have to adapt, and be willing to adapt. And really, as Melissa would say, be able to say as a man, oh, fuck it. Like she would call them the fuck it fathers. Like, fuck, yeah,
Yeah.
I'll do
Yeah.
that.
Yeah. Yeah.
And I guess frankly, I probably fall into that a little bit. Like, I don't care what you think of me. I'm going to do what I think
Yeah.
is rational.
And there is, and I think, if we want to make this more masculine, there's bravery in that,
Yeah,
another
that's
thing,
true.
right? So yeah,
That's
actually, I'm being
Tell
very
my
brave.
wife that we're going to play this part for my wife.
You did an event recently with Melissa was there, and Eve Rodsky was there, and Zach
Zach Watson,
Watson,
Paige Connell, Dr.
and
Julie Wayne from Wake Forest, who's really good. Kate Mangino was there. Ed Combs, Dr. Gary Barker, and then Alyssa, Dr. Daminger from University of Wisconsin.
I'm interested in, Eve and Zach, the fair play people. I mean,
Zach had a last minute emergency and couldn't make it, but I know Zach. I'm
right.
happy to Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I guess first for people, so Eve Rodsky was my first guest on this show, and she was amazing. But for people who haven't heard that episode, just explain what the fair play system is.
Sure. Yeah. So, and I'm a fair play facilitator myself. Essentially, fair play is a system that is designed to try to make it more efficient to run a home. And the foundational elements of fair play really boil down to the CPE framework, meaning that as you're dividing the tasks that are needed to run the home, any of the tasks assigned to you or you assign to yourself, you have to own from start to finish. And the concept behind that, owning it from start to finish, really boils down to three things: the conception, the planning, and the execution of that task. So let's take for example the dishes, because it's something that happens every day, multiple times a day. So the conception is like recognizing when, not just like basically when the dishes need to be done. Do new dishes need to be bought? Do we need more dish detergent? Like all the things that you need to run the dishwasher. That's the conception. The planning would be figuring out, that routine. Like, for example, I shouldn't say nobody. Most people don't like to wake up to a bunch of dirty dishes in the sink. So figuring out the system that you need to put in place to make sure that you're rotating all of the dishes through. So when you wake up in the morning, there aren't any dirty dishes in the sink. That's your responsibility. And the execution's doing the dishes. So it could be like, if your partner is responsible for cooking, then you should probably be doing the dishes like right after the meal, or maybe even during the meal as they're done using the pans. You're putting the dishes in the dishwasher. So you own that from start to finish. And the key to that is that you don't have one partner telling the other partner what to do. You don't have like spouse A telling spouse B, have you done the dishes yet? Hey, do we need new dish detergent? Because ultimately what happens is, if you don't own a task from start to finish, you have somebody who is responsible for the full mental load, meaning they have to be the calendar keeper. They have to be the one doing the mental gymnastics in their head to make sure it's done, the CEO of the house, so to speak, or COO, I should say. And that the problem with that is, if there's, in particular, that's not above and beyond the unfairness of it, but if one of the spouses is working long hours outside of the home, they only have so much, brain power, and they can't devote all their brain power to managing a home and to managing their business. So that has to be divided up equally or equitably, depending on your circumstances, just as much as doing the physical labor. And then the final thing is, with fair play, is to agree on a minimum standard of care. And, that would be essentially like, what does done look like to you? And there can be disagreements there, but you ultimately, if there's a big disagreement, you have to ask yourself, what would a reasonable person say done looks like to you? So once that's established, then the challenging part is making sure that if partner A is the one responsible for the dishes, partner B is not over their shoulder saying like, this isn't how you should do the dishes. Like, you shouldn't throw it in like a wild raccoon. It should be more of a Tetris exercise. Like, you can't do that. That just drives people nuts. Let them be, leave them be. If they want to listen to a football podcast while they're doing the dishes, that's fine. Like,
just to use a random example, I'm sure.
Yes,
right.
yes, totally,
And if my
out of
wife's
left
listening, I'm right. Yeah. I want to stick with the dishes because what I loved about what you said so far is that every time you've gone back to efficiency, you're like, I want to make this home run as efficiently as possible. But weirdly, a lot of labor, we actually have a real emotional connection to. And I remember my friend saying to me, it's nuts. Every couple I know, there's one person who grew up in a family where they tidied up immediately after dinner, and that's done then. And then you can relax and you can sit around and have a drink and a chat and a party. Have other people who are like, no, we sit and drink and leave it till the morning, and they cannot see the other person's point of view. They just can't. They're like, this is right. As in, like, this is righteous. This is like a correct way to do things. And which is why I think that negotiating over the minimum standard of care, it can be very, very difficult.
Yeah. Uh, so I'll use a one-off task as an example to work through it, and then let's talk through the bigger picture. A task that I struggle with that my wife is supposed to own fully, and this is where every household doesn't run perfectly. Like sometimes it doesn't work out that way because she travels a lot, etc. But would be anything insurance related, particularly with our youngest kid. So I grew up in a house where we were in a tornado as a kid. My mom was badly injured, and then that also triggered multiple sclerosis. So a lot of my memories are my mom basically screaming and crying on the phone to try to get health insurance to pay for something that they should just automatically pay for. And in the States, one of the things that health insurance companies did at that time, I don't know about now, is they knew that the more barriers they would put up to reimburse somebody, the less likely that they would have to do it, that people would give up. So for me, it's like a little bit traumatic where I just hate insurance companies because of that. I'm sure the people that work there are great. I'm not. It's just my experience. So it's like I can't do this because I will have zero patience dealing with these people. And so you have to kind of talk through some of the things that trigger you. That could be trauma driven, that you're like, I'm not going to do this. And then obviously there's skill sets that are natural, so you should maybe take them on, or things that you love to do, like I love to cook, you take them on. But that's low hanging fruit. Now let's talk about what happens when there are real differences in how you think a home should be done. And like what you just said is probably in the couples that I work with, one of the biggest challenges is one person's like, yeah, I want to come home and relax. And the other person's like, I can't relax until it's done. Right. So one of the things to look at is if you're aspiring for equal leisure time, which is what I try to help my couples get to, is equal leisure time, is how can we look at the household in a way where I divide the tasks to meet both goals. So let's say, for example, just throwing it out there, like one person's like, I can't relax until the house is clean, and the other person's like, I can't, I need to come home and relax. Like, frankly, a lot of what a clean house looks like is really picking up and making sure that everything is kind of where it should be. And that in itself is not a massive task if it's done routinely. So perhaps the person who cannot relax until that is done is in charge of that.
Yes. Sorry, go on.
So maybe the other person is the money manager. Maybe the other person is also in charge of the less frequent things outside. There's obviously a way to do it. That's what I would recommend, because then both people are happy. Okay, so I touched on something. Did I touch on something with you?
Yeah, well, I mean, I'm really interested to hear Kate's, I've forgotten her surname, your friend.
Yeah, Mangino, yeah.
So they've started a podcast called Equalish, and I'm really excited because she's the messy one. She's the messy one in her partnership. And almost always I get sucked into this thing where it's basically there's a messy man and a woman with higher standards, because that's just how I see the world. But actually, there's plenty of cases where it's the other way around.
Oh yeah, it's that way in our marriage too. I'm the one that wants things. I'm the one picking up after her. She's like a tornado as she walks through the house.
Right, yeah, that's me. I'm the tornado. You've glamorized it a bit there. I'm the tornado. But that's really hard if you're with someone who, who sort of doesn't care and doesn't see the value almost in what you're doing, because they're like, I don't need the house to be like that for me to relax.
Yeah.
But then what you're saying is the way to deal with that is to offset it by taking control of another area. That's what makes sense to you.
You
Right.
got it. But I want to add one thing to what you said is it doesn't matter what kind of relationship it is and what it is overall, whether it's inside the home or in the business world. If you don't feel appreciated, it's going to damage your relationship. So always show appreciation.
Yeah.
And what you're saying is common, right? Like where a lot of people don't show appreciation for things that are done behind the scenes. And frankly, again, gender norms, like a lot of guys don't show appreciation to women for managing more of the mental load, and then resentment comes from that. So it's important to always recognize the work that your partner's doing and show appreciation for that.
What you've done there with the fair play system is you've addressed work and workload, which Eve doesn't really do in the book, as in I'm talking professional work. And actually, if someone is working out of the house all the time, it is harder for them to do the mental load as well, not just the execution.
Right.
And what I've found is that actually in the last, basically Eloise and I used to work together, then she's got a job and she's been out of the house more. And now all of a sudden I am getting irritated by mess.
Yeah.
And I'm not just like, we need to tidy up for mum. I'm like, guys, you need to tidy up because I'm not fucking tidying up again. I'm sick
Exactly.
of
Yeah.
it because I'm feeling unappreciated. You know, like these things do shift, don't they? We start to feel
They
the
do.
pain.
Yeah,
Yeah.
they do. And one of the other one of the things that I also manage a little bit differently personally with my clients or just in my houses than the fair play system would perhaps propose is that I do not necessarily subscribe to the fact that all time's equal, and I know people are going to be like that's terrible, but I'll give you an example. One of my advisory board members, his wife is an ER surgeon, and he's got a big job too, but it's not nearly as stressful. So when she has a bad day, it's because someone died in her arms, right? Their time's not equal. Like that, the stress and burden of that kind of job is far more significant than his job or like most of our jobs. So of course, as a result, he needs to be conscious of that, and he is. He's an amazing husband. And so when she gets home, like he makes sure that it's a place of peace and quiet and where she can decompress and kind of get through whatever she had to go through at work. So I think we also need to use common sense and judgment when we're looking at what our partner is doing outside of the home, to make sure that obviously you're aspiring for equal leisure time, but also when you're dividing up the tasks to be aware that there are tasks that are necessary to run a home that have a higher emotional load than others. And if one of the people in the relationship has a big job like that, the other one should probably take more of the emotional labor.
Yeah. You've given an example there of a man who's cognizant of that. Does that become very difficult to negotiate around?
I think that societal norms can play, how do I say this? When I posted that clip on YouTube, there were actually people saying that he's less of a man because he does that for his wife. But if it were to be the husband who's the surgeon and the wife created that home environment, I can assure you it would be only compliments. So just as, as fathers, we get giant trophies for doing the things that women aren't even appreciated for doing.
Mm.
The same can be said for men who do those things for women as supporting their careers. But I want to, there's a caveat to this. You can't weaponize this either. Like you can't be like, I've had
Yeah,
such
my
great,
job's more important than yours, so I need to get my
yeah,
downtime. Yeah.
exactly. Yeah.
I
So
think
you've got to be honest about it.
there's a brilliant book by someone who's been on the show, and it's called How Not to Hate Your Husband After Kids. He goes to see the couples therapist, Terry Real, and he's like, men want to have this story where they go out and they fight dragons for the family.
Yeah, yeah,
And,
yeah.
everything we've been discussing, it's because like we kind of expected to, but then that narrative can turn into, so I need my rest and recuperation so that I can go and do that. And we don't realize that the job description has changed.
That's a really, I think it's called the hero's story.
Exactly.
Yeah,
Exactly.
that's
Yeah.
such a great point, because it's all around us, right? It's in the books that we read, the TV shows that we watch. It's like reinforced all the time. And it's probably what a lot of men saw growing up as well. And it makes it harder for women, because they're the ones out there slaying dragons too. They're right there with us.
Yeah. And but I think, what one of the things I keep coming back to is that we all want to make a sacrifice. Like,
Yeah.
sacrifice is really important to humans since like recorded human thought. This idea that you go out and you kill something that's important to you and you get something back from the universe. It's kind of deep within our kind of collective psyche. And I think, the mess that men are in is
Yeah.
that we're no longer quite sure. It used to be quite simple. Like,
Yeah.
you're going to basically sacrifice your body and everything to childbirth and childcare. And
Yep.
I'm going to kind of sacrifice everything to the working world. And at least we all know what we're doing.
Yep.
And now we're in a mess.
Yeah. In terms of just pure efficiencies, clearly, when you have one person who does, this is what they do, they like, just as you laid it out. But then in the society that we had 80 years ago, both of those positions, frankly, were glorified, right?
Mm.
Like women who were really great homemakers, they were glorified for that. Men who were really great providers were glorified for that. So it even made it easier and simpler. But clearly, that's not the best system for most people for many, many reasons. But it did provide simplicity. And sometimes that simplicity makes it easier to be happier.
And I think what's so sad about the YouTube comments that guy is less of a man for caring for his wife is it shows men actually not really glorifying or appreciating the sacrifice of care, which is where we need to get
Yeah,
to.
I
I
agree.
think it's like we need to recognize care as this beautiful, painful, Elisa Strauss would say, big thorny issue, and that's I think that's how we move forward, really.
And I think for a lot of guys, like working outside the home, it's quantifiable. Like you can see your paycheck, right? It makes it so much easier to feel good about it, because it's like, hey, look what I've contributed. Care is messy. Care is not quantifiable.
Mm.
And so much about what's done in care is happening in your heart and in your head. People don't see it. And it's harder to get the confirmation or the affirmation that you need to feel good about what you're doing.
Yeah, and then also it's so messy, isn't it? It's so messy because it's about being in the process, and you're like, I don't know if this care I'm giving is achieving anything in this moment.
Care's tricky. Yep.
I know that a lot of people who listen to this podcast have very young kids, but recently, a friend of mine did a poll um, on some groups that we're on, trying to find out what kind of talks to put on, and she asked men and women what they were interested in discussing, and relationships came back at about 25% from men, and just wasn't even on there for women. And
Really?
I wonder, yeah. And this is mums with young kids.
Relationships.
I think because women are so, the good mother ideal means that all you care about is that baby and that child. You give everything. You mean you lose your sense of self completely. I just wonder what we can do to
Mm.
persuade both partners to spend a bit of energy on each other when they have very young kids. And there's very little energy spare, right?
Yeah. So kind of for folks who have young kids, if you feel like this is really tough. It can't get any tougher than this. You're probably right. Like you're just, sleep deprived and time scarce. And, so I think like if my advice is, to try to kill like 5 birds with one stone. And so for those couples who need, time with one another, and you definitely need that, here's what I would recommend. Have like one day a week that is your time together. And it doesn't have to be in the evening. Maybe it's Saturday morning for 6 hours. Maybe it whatever. Like it's a half a day or a significant part of the day. And figure out like during this time, it's just you two. There's no child with you. And if you have the financial means, let's say you hire a babysitter, and that you list out to the babysitter all of the additional tasks that they can do to earn more money. Or you tell the babysitter, hey, can you bring a friend? And those tasks are picking up, right? They're doing the dishes. They're the things that would be a time suck for you, that are above and beyond caregiving, sweeping the floors. So then when you come back, it's not like you just had a reprieve from being a caregiver, but you also come back to a cleaner home. I had Dr. Ashley Williams from Harvard on my podcast early on, and she did this study where she sent out couples to like a fancy restaurant and paid for it. And then other couples, they could choose. So it was basically $200 to go to a fancy restaurant, or the other couple could take $50 for casual dining, and then $150 for housekeepers to come in for a couple of hours and clean their house. So when they went to eat, they came home to a clean house. So $200 to do one thing, $200 to do the other. And like it was off the charts. So many more people were happier when they came back to a clean house and had an average meal. So that is a practical approach that I would recommend for couples who, want to spend time with another. The second thing that I would recommend.
Wait, I just got so much to say about that because it's so
Go
good.
ahead. Yeah.
So wait, you remember that point. First thing, it doesn't have to be the evening thing.
Yeah,
I just think it's so gold. Like, I think it took me and Eloise ages to realize that we've got nothing to say to each other after 9 p.m.
Yeah, right. You're decision fatigue. Yeah.
I've got nothing, man. So that really trying to find another time of day to do it, I think is brilliant. And then that is so clever. Basically paying for a deluxe babysitter service and going for a McDonald's is much better.
Yeah.
That's just brilliant. And the reason I wanted to jump in is because what I used to do, and I think this is in Eve Rodsky's book, is like, what type of husband have you got? The big kid. I used to, make sure my wife had time to go out with friends and enjoy herself, and I'd have an amazing time with the kids, but I wouldn't move the house on in any way.
Yeah, right.
So she'd come back and be like, it wasn't worth it. I've come back to more to do than if I'd stayed at home. So she hadn't had a break at all. Tell me, you're a pro. You've got your efficiency down. I'm interested in perpetual arguments, and I'm really interested what yours and your wife's are, and what happens when they go well and what happens when they go badly.
We got a few. First, there's only one space after a period, not two.
Right.
When you're typing, that is an ongoing, it is so.
That'd be just an amazing thing to take through the divorce courts. Okay.
Okay. I think the challenge for any human being is like how you approach a friction point, and sometimes we are not good at choosing our words wisely when there's something that needs to be addressed. So give you a perfect example. This was last night. I'm not going to say which one did this. But when my wife said, I'm sorry, I didn't mean to say that, but when she approached the issue like late at night, we were decision fatigued. I'm ironing. I was ironing, and it started with, "Why would you?" Like, don't start there. There's nothing good
What
that comes out
kind
of
idiot?
Yeah, exactly. So I think for us, like approaching the challenge of like, hey, we have a challenge that we have to deal with. Can we sit down and figure out how to work through that challenge? Like approaching the problem that way. Neither of us are great at doing that every single time.
What are the first words we use to get into a discussion, right? Without it instantly being criticism, resulting in defensiveness with result, it's so tricky. And on the, on Kate's podcast, they asked this question on the first episode, and actually I think it was Zach was saying, my wife says to me, "Zach, you ready for some feedback?" And I was listening to it and I was like, fuck no. But they've obviously, what I got from that is this has to be agreed by each couple, right? That terminology, because I would not be up for that at all.
You know what? When Hope gets home, I'll ask her, "Hey, babe, are you ready for some feedback?" I'll like you to record that, me bobbing and weaving.
Oh, good. I'm glad you had the same reaction as me. But I guess it's like we've got to find those things for ourselves. There's no magic set of words, is there? It's always going to be tricky, but you need to sort of agree on a code. And one of the things I've realized recently is that I used to be like, it only took one of us to pop off, to lose it, to get angry, to go in, for us both to, right? For it to turn into this massive row.
Right.
And now what I've realized is that actually it only takes one of us to refuse to do that, and then there can't be a row. So if one of us has the presence to be like, "Do you know what? I can't do this at the moment. I'm getting really angry. I'm getting defensive. I'm getting personal. I'm going to say something mean or hurtful. I promise we can pick this up again. I'm not doing it now." And often the other person really wants to, like, no, no, it's fine. We can do it. And I'm like, well, do you know what? I can't, because I can feel I'm like agitated. I'm physiologically aroused. Then it can't happen. And it only takes one of you to be like, and that's really powerful.
That is such a great point. I could have used that advice last night. I guess she could have started with, "Are you ready for some feedback?"
Have you got anything else that that you'd like to talk about that's kind of interesting you at the moment?
I think, and I'm gonna make some assumptions here because the UK system is more advanced than ours. We're going backwards. But in the United States, we don't have paid paternity leave is not common, in particular for men. But what is common in the United States, and I think is common overseas, and please stop me if I'm wrong, is that you have what's called the motherhood penalty. Do you have that in the UK?
Yeah.
Okay. So what I want to share is this, that in 45% of households in the United States, women are earning the same, if not significantly more than men. I don't know what that translates into in the UK. But we have to reconsider, after a baby is born, what caregiving looks like, not just practically, not just the social emotional support that's needed, but also economically, like in our own personal finances. So in the United States, for every year a woman leaves the workforce to be a caregiver, she loses $245,000 of lifetime compensation, which really is household compensation, because that's one less year that she's not getting a promotion, or she's not getting a cost of living adjustment, or she's not contributing to her retirement. And 50 years ago, when men were always the breadwinner, yeah, of course it made financial sense for the woman to be the one who stayed home for the year or 2 years or whatever. That's not the case anymore for everybody. So my recommendation is to do the math. I have a calculator on my website at modernhusbands.com that Finn Mango and I created that allow people to input the numbers, what your earnings are, her earnings, the cost of childcare, and just look at what the financial scenarios are. What would be the financial implications over, and the calculator does this, 15 years of one person staying home for 1 year or 6 months, or the other person staying home, or only staying home for 6 weeks or 8 weeks and then having childcare. And the numbers might not lead you to the decision that makes the most financial sense, but at least you're making an informed decision. So stop assuming that the best decision is for a woman to stay home, and just stop defaulting into comparing her income to the cost of childcare. That math, it doesn't work anymore for most people.
Big part of what you do is financial. It was really interesting you talking about the insurance, because I could see there this incredible emotional reaction that you would have to dealing with insurance companies. But also, I imagine you've got a very different emotional reaction to the need for high quality insurance.
Yeah.
Like, it must be it must live in your body in a different way. People's stories about money and the way they've grown up with money are so individual. Like, so for me and Eloise, she, her parents were very kind of boom and bust. And there was a point where they were all in private school and they all had to be taken out. And there was this deep shame around it. Whereas my parents were really steady, but there was always money. And then I think I grew up with a real immaturity around money. So I have no problem saying to the kids, do you know what? We can't afford that at the moment. Whereas for Eloise, she's like, no, we can't. We cannot ever let them know that we're watching it financially. When we have we bring these stories, neither one of those is right, but they both feel right to us, right? I'm just wondering what kind of battles you see around this.
Yeah, a lot. So a lot of what I do has to do with the behavioral, emotional side, the psychology of money. And, budgeting is easy. like when you look at, credit scoring and all these different, like how to invest for retirement, these aren't difficult concepts to learn. What is difficult is, like, an example from what you're telling me, your wife either overheard, it was either unintentional or intentional. It's called financial enmeshment, meaning that the parents either intentionally or unintentionally overshared their financial circumstances to their children, to the point where it created some financial trauma. And as a result of that, a lot of a lot of the money stories that we have within ourselves are called money scripts. They derive from our experiences in childhood from ages 6 to 12. So if she experienced that in those ages, it could have been particularly difficult. Not that it wouldn't be difficult at any time. And so for her, she's probably very guarded about sharing any financial information, with your kids. And when you have two people who are married with different money scripts, these types of things come up all of the time. Like, how much do you have to have in savings to feel comfortable? Like, for me, because of my money script, I have to have a lot in savings to feel comfortable. Otherwise, I have anxiety. Some people struggle with like taking their foot off the gas when they're spending, right? And they don't know how to work through those things. So if one person is a spendthrift, like they can't spend money, and the other person is constantly spending money, like there are going to be real battles with that. And those have to be worked through with conversations because there's an empathy gap. My dad grew up, he was a sharecropper. So for people in the UK, that means that you were a farmer, but you didn't have enough money to own the farm. So basically you farmed it with just like, and made next to nothing. And so for him to go to college, he had to finish, and he lived in a railroad car, and he lived on the railroad. He lived in the railroad car as well, because it was rent free. And so growing up, we had, just terrible, terrible cars, because in the United States, there's no public transportation. So it was terrible, terrible cars. But my dad had a good job. So, like, I always wondered, why are we driving really crappy cars? And it turns out that was how he could afford to pay for our college. And because of my dad's frugality and like how we grew up, of being, my dad made good money, but he was really frugal. We were very open about our finances. I've always been sensitive to spending money on anything really other than experiences and education. That was my priority. My wife, their parents kind of lived more check to check. They were more of like the keep up with the Joneses. Not that there's anything wrong with it, but they had a nice car. They had like a Volvo, but they didn't pay for their kids' college. And my wife went to Disney World with her family, and that was like a really important memory to her. And the memory of my father sharing his deeply personal story about a car and why he sacrificed and my mom sacrificed to send us to college, was one angle. And the other angle was my wife sharing this story about why Disney World meant so much. So here's the point. I won $25,000, a teaching award. And when we got the award, instantly, what do I want to do with it? I want to save for our kids' college. What does she want to do? She wants to go to Disney World. Massive fight, massive argument. Why? Because that amount of money and what to do with it resonated so deeply with our upbringings and our childhood experiences that what we did with it was important to our own value sets. And we had never had conversations about why we felt the way we did. And for couples, they need to have very open conversations about their
When you
child.
say that, do you mean at the time you have this row, but actually neither of you know that backstory about each other?
You
You
got it.
don't know that, right?
You got it. And so because I didn't appreciate, not only that, like from my dad's perspective, he would always see a nice car and be like, "Oh, look at the money that they're wasting." And
Yeah.
he called Disney World a tourist trap.
So
So
then
from my
you're back into this righteousness, right?
yeah,
Yeah, this is moral.
yeah,
Yeah.
that's exactly what it was. I felt like it was immoral. And so and I'm going to sound like a terrible person. At one point I was just like, I tell you what, we will go to Disney World as long as when our kid's 18 and we can't afford to send them to college, you tell them, well, I made your dad, I made your dad take us to
A
Disney
photo of
World.
you and Mickey. Come on.
Yeah,
Um,
yeah. But it really was a dispute about almost morality and for us. Like I felt like it was
I think
wrong.
to maybe, end on a bit of an upending, I guess one of the reasons I'd encourage people when they've got really young kids to spend time thinking about these things is that you've learned so much about each other through that conflict. Like, I've learned more about my wife through arguing well. Now we've learned how to do it, through
Yeah, well said.
understanding what are the values that make you feel like this, like from really trying to understand why this makes you feel like a good person or a bad person. It's like I've learned much more about than I knew before. Where before you have kids, you just think everything about each other's brilliant. That's all you kind of really care about. And it's actually when you have kids that you're like, you're a completely different person carrying a completely different world viewpoint
Yep.
than me.
I'll end on two quick positive notes. So the first, for young parents out there, one of my favorite all-time books is called The Opposite of Spoiled. It was written by Ron Lieber from the New York Times. He runs their money column. And he essentially traveled the world to try to find these really unique experiences that people had where they used money to teach their children their family values. So, for example, when you see somebody who's homeless on the street and your child is with you, do you give them $1 or not? And in the book, one of the parents he interviewed said they always give the homeless person $1 because they want to teach their children generosity. Right. So I like that book because it kind of gives you ideas on how to use money, not as this like pragmatic utilitarian tool, but really teaches people to use it in a way to shape who they are and what they value. The second thing to consider is that when you talk about money, obviously, you need to talk about money when emotions are low so cognition can be high, particularly for people who experience financial trauma. So you have to have regular money dates, like on a Saturday morning or a Sunday morning when, the kids are still asleep and you've had your cup of coffee and you can like kind of like talk about things rationally. But don't always talk about the bad stuff. Always start with the good stuff. So one of the things that we do, we go buy one lottery ticket and we know we're not going to win, but that's not the point. We just use it as a way when we're on a walk to discuss what would we do if we would win the lottery. And what we're looking for is like patterns, right? Like one of the patterns that we recognized early on is that we would basically hire people to do a bunch of the things around the house. And so can we hire people to like walk around with gold fans and make us feel cool? And no, we can't do that. But we can hire somebody to mow the lawn. We can hire a housekeeper to come in once a week. And so if you're talking freely about your dreams and ambitions and what you would do with endless amounts of money, you probably will stumble upon things that you can do with a reasonable amount of money.
I hope you enjoyed that conversation as much as I did. Check out the Modern Husbands website for all the services they offer. Also, check out the Modern Husbands podcast, which is really good. And you can find recordings of the event he was talking about with all those big names on Brian Page's LinkedIn page. Please follow me on Instagram and TikTok at Be a Happier Parent, and I'll see you all next week.